Hey everybody, how's it going? This video is just going to walk you through our block one of our Bill of Rights unit. So let's go. This unit's going to, or I'm sorry, this block is going to be basically focused on the First Amendment, which is going to cover information around freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to petition the government, freedom to protest, and freedom of the press. So the first thing I want you to do, I'm going to kind of share my screen real quick. The first thing I want you to do, if you have the unit planner downloaded or somewhere around, is I want you to go through, and you can either do this on the document itself if you want to, or you could do it in a Google Doc and send it to me. But I want you to just go through and answer these questions around the First Amendment. So as you can see, here's the First Amendment right here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peacefully to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. So there it is. It basically boils down to, it's fancy old time talk for what does the First Amendment give you the right to? It gives you the right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of, where did it go? Freedom of the people to peacefully assemble, basically protest, freedom of you being able to petition the government. That's like writing a complaint letter to the government. And then the freedom of the press to where you can freely report what's going on in the world, including things related to government. So take a moment to go through and answer the questions for this survey. And then once you get to the bottom, I want you to stop there. And then we're going to go over these two cases. So take a moment to do that. If you need to pause this video, you can. All right. Hopefully you got a chance to do the survey. Let's get right into our presentation. So now let's see if I'm able to share the screen. So if I do stop share, and now I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. I'm going to do this PowerPoint, and hopefully this works. Okay, so in our Bill of Rights PowerPoint, oh, this is just a brainstorm you can do right off the bat. I know we already talked about what it is, but what rights are protected by the First Amendment? There they are, just like we just kind of talked about. There should be a video clip if you want to watch on Google Classroom about the First Amendment, the time video clip, so you can check that out if you feel like that'll be helpful. We do this, I know maybe you don't have a chance to talk to somebody about it, but just kind of once you do finish the survey, maybe chat in what you think, if there's anything interesting that stuck out to you or not from those questions. And now let's talk about the very first Supreme Court case that deals with the First Amendment we're going to look at. So this case happened in a case known as Texas versus Johnson in 1989. Essentially you have this gentleman, Gary Lee Johnson, who lived in Texas, and he didn't like some of the policies that Ronald Reagan was doing. So at the time, there was a law that said you were not allowed to, in Texas, there was a Texas law that said you were not allowed to essentially burn or desecrate the American flag. And so Gary Lee Johnson, in his frustration with Ronald Reagan, burned the American flag, and he got in trouble for it. He essentially then sued and said, wait a minute, I have a right to freedom of speech, which includes me being able to burn the flag. The Supreme Court, was a very close decision. It was a 5-4 decision. And they decided that, I'm going to have you wait on that. So I'm going to give you these two cases, and I'm not going to tell you what happens until the end after I go over both of them. So maybe pause the video right now, and I want you to think, what would you have done? Do you think that he should be able to burn the American flag as protected by freedom of speech? Or do you think the American flag is a sacred thing that it should be an exception to your freedom of speech? So take a minute to think about that. Again, I'm going to tell you what the answer is in just a second. All right, our next case, Morse versus Frederick. So this happened with Joseph Frederick, who was a senior at Juneau Douglas High School. And essentially there was, I don't know if you guys know this, but in the Olympics, There's somebody who runs by with a torch to light the Olympic torch. Anyway, the Olympic torch was being, somebody was going to be running through their town. I want to say this was in Alaska, that it was like going by. And homeboy here, Joseph, and all his friends come out and they make this song, this sign, Bong Hits for Jesus. And in this sign, they did it across from the high school. And as far as I understand, this was done kind of intentionally. Almost, this Joseph Frederick had done something similar before, and he was kind of trying to test the bounds of his freedom of speech. So he does this. The school administrator is just like, oh, I don't think so, take it down. They refuse to take it down, and then he gets suspended by the principal. He said that this should be a part of his freedom of speech. The school principal disagreed and said that it was interfering with the learning of the schools and the students in the school. And the Supreme Court, again, in a very close decision, 5-4, this is what they said. Okay, so I want you to pause. If somebody's around, you could talk about it. What do you think the Supreme Court said for both of these cases? So here's what they said. For the first case, if we go back, in Texas versus Johnson, the Supreme Court came out with 5 people supporting Johnson. And by people, I mean Supreme Court justices. So it went his way. Basically, if you are burning a flag as a form of political speech, you are protected by the First Amendment. 5 Supreme Court justices agreed, 4 disagreed. So I want you to take a minute to think about that. If you want to go for an advanced, there is a reading that talks about the reasoning in the unit packet that you could go through and do the reading and answer the questions. But I don't know, is that a surprise to you or not? Very interesting. And for our next case, this time the Supreme Court ruled 5 Supreme Court justices saying that they disagreed with Frederick. They actually supported the principal in the suspension. So they said that was going to be a limit on his First Amendment freedom of speech, and so he wasn't allowed to do it. And the suspension was upheld. So these are 2 great examples of the First Amendment, 2 issues that test where is your freedom of speech. For any of these rights we're going to be learning about this unit, you are going to learn that every single one of these rights, there's a limit. And this is kind of where the limit fell. It was okay for the burning the flag, but this was where the Supreme Court was just basically like, you know what, that's a little bit too much. Okay, so moving along, there are some exceptions or limits to the freedom of speech based on a lot of cases, and here are some of them. So number 1, if your speech incites violence, if you're basically trying to convince people to do violent acts, that's not protected under the First Amendment. If you have things that are obscene, or speech that's obscene, that's also not protected. If you have what's called fighting words, similar to that, inciting violence, that's also not protected. For safety, if you're yelling that there's a fire in a crowded movie theater and people all scramble to get out and there was no fire, and you're like, I was just doing it for fun, no way, that is not going to be protected under the freedom of speech. That's where the limit is for that. Also, if you're doing things like slander, libel, defamation, if you're like attacking people's character, saying things that aren't true, that's also not protected. Also, if you're doing speech that involves criminal activity or sedition, basically like planning against the government, that also would not be protected. And so is plagiarism, perjury, and blackmail. So that's definitely where the limits of the First Amendment are. So basically, you have freedom of speech in the United States, except around these things here. And that's where the limit is. All right. Oh, and here's another option you could do for an advanced. There was an interesting case called Citizens United versus FEC. If you want to check that out, you could do that. All right. I'm going to say one last thing that you're going to have to do for this. So I'm going to stop my share here. And now I'm going to do another share back to our unit packet. Share. So if you got a chance to jot down some notes from that, that's great. This is the advanced option right here. You can read both sides. And now I do want you to practice right here. Here are 3 more cases, Tinker versus Des Moines, Bethel School District versus Fraser, and Hazelwood School District versus Plumer. I think that's how you pronounce it. Actually, I have no idea. Probably should know that. Anyways, I want you to please read through these 3 other Supreme Court cases that deal with the First Amendment, and then I want you to answer question number 1 and 2 here. Now, you can either do this in the packet, you could do it on a Google Doc, you could do it on a piece of paper, and then take a picture and send it to me. However you want to do it. Don't forget to take the Empower quiz that goes with this. And that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for checking out the video, and we'll see you later. Okay, bye.